My name is Patrick. Patrick Vandenbroek.
You want to spell that for me?
Patrick. And my last name Vandenbroek.
Is that your traditional name?
No, it's not.
What is your traditional name?
My traditional name is Eliaso.
Can you spell that for me?
Eliaso. And the last name I gave you, Vandenbroek, that's actually my dad's last name, and he's a Dutchman. Okay, but my family last name is Amber, Amber. Okay.
Tell me about your family. What different ethnicities do you have combined in your family?
My grandfather's mom, she was born in a mission called Yarba. Her name was Minnie Koroba. So that classed myself as an Aboriginal person myself. But my grandmother, she's from the Torres Strait, Zenathkes, which is situated between Papua New Guinea and the tip of Australia. There are about 175 islands, but only 19 islands are inhabited. I was traditionally adopted. Now, nowadays, when you get adopted, you go to courthouse and you sign some paper. But traditional adoption, it's only by word, by mouth. And it's one of our customs where the oldest grandchild must be given to the grandparents. So I'm one of the oldest grandchild, but I was given to my grandmother in order to keep that tradition going. And it's one of our customs that the oldest grandchild, it could be the boy or the girl, is given to the grandparents. And then he or she then becomes the youngest brother to the siblings. So in other words, my biological mother, I then call her sister. And that's one of our customs. Mum, she's from a place called Mobiag, which is in the western side of Torres Strait. Situated about 40 kilometers from Thursday Island, which is the home of the Torres Strait. The place itself, Mobiag, is a regional dialect, and it's also an Aboriginal dialect. But linguists, they couldn't say the original name of the island. Consisted of 18 letters. Urpikigo Pedras. They couldn't say that. So what they did, they changed it. The language, Urpikigo Pedras, is actually a sacred name of Mobiag Island. Mabuyag, original dialect, changed. So the island itself was named Mobiag. The dialect now, today, is Kalalagauya, spoken in the western Torres Strait. But there's another dialect. They speak closer to the Papua New Guinea coastline, the top western, Gudamaluilgal. They speak Kalakawaya. And here in the central parts of the Torres Strait, they speak Kulkalgauya. But further to the eastern side of Torres Strait, they speak Meriam Mir, which is a completely different language. That language is like an influence by the people of Papua New Guinea. All right.
Tell me about your childhood growing up. You have brothers and sisters. Was it a happy childhood? Was it a tough childhood?
It was a great journey. My journey as a childhood started here in Cairns. I grew up, I was born in Cairns, I grew up in Cairns. I went to school here in Cairns. And what happened was that coming to school, speaking English wasn't my language. It was very hard at start. But gradually as I grew through wisdom and understanding, I got to know the English language a bit more better. I went to primary school, I also went to high school, and I graduated in grade 12. I continued my studies. I studied RATEP, Rural Education Teaching Program. Rural Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Teaching Education Program. That's what it meant. And that gives you opportunity to become a primary teacher or a secondary teacher. But through my young childhood, now because I was grown up by my real grandparents, they taught me a lot about my heritage itself, Torres Strait Island, Torres Strait custom, tradition. And if it wasn't for my grandparents, I wouldn't be the person I am today. But I'm very honored to be taught by my grandparents, because that's where we get our understanding, knowledge from the elders. And growing up, I adapted both the Western world and my custom, the culture itself. But now, I practice it both and again, because the world outside, they want to know more about the indigenous culture of this continent of Australia.
What can the world learn from Aboriginal culture? Is there something to teach the world? Is there something missing in the world today that Aboriginal culture could address? A problem that Aboriginal culture could address?
This culture itself is one of the oldest living cultures in the world. Very unique culture. And most people need to understand about who are the real people of the land. And they need to learn that. We teach that this land here, you see, it belongs to the indigenous people. But behind them, there's always a positive. And that's if you learn from us, you learn how to make the world a better place. I'll give you one example. Many scientists, they spend millions and millions of dollars trying to find cures for any chronic disease. This is one example I'm talking about. We indigenous people, we only walk into the bush, into the rainforest, into the nature itself, pick out a certain plant, pick out a certain fruit. That one day becomes our medicine. We don't spend money. We live off the nature itself. And if people around the world can understand on how we survive in the wilderness, we can make the world a better place. Only if they learn from us. But in order to do that, we have to come together. Because when you look at it, we're all one people. We all have bloods in our body. We all have mind of our own. If we learn of one another, we can make the world a better place. But if they know that this country here, Australia, belongs to indigenous culture, they will know that, they will know and understand about how we live in this environment itself.
How are Aborigines surviving today in Australia?
Well, most parts in Australia, especially remote areas, they live in their own comfort zone. They live isolated, away from life itself, especially the westernized world. And you bring them over to the bright lights, they won't understand on how people are living today here. So they will worry and they'll cry to go back home. They live in their own environment, their own comfort zone. They live the traditional ways. They speak language, their own dialects. They eat and survive off the land or the sea itself. But here, especially closer to the coastal areas of Australia, people now living and surviving through the Western world because government, politics, and all of that. We understand what that is. But we adapt it. Even though we live in this world here, even though we live in a house, electricity, we drive cars, what we do, we still practice our culture first. And then we also live in the surrounding. But most parts in Australia, they live the old ways, the old traditional ways. But here, even though we live in the Western world, we still adapt culture. We put it together, all right? Because if you don't have culture, if you say you're a Bama, Aboriginal man, or Torres Strait Islander, but you don't practice it, you're just like the clouds fading away. You're lost. You're nobody. You're trying to grow, but the seed is planted in the thorn bushes.
What are some of the problems Aboriginal people are facing?
Many problems today. From my understanding, alcohol, drugs, and violence, domestic violence. It's a big issue for Indigenous people today. It's not our culture, custom, but it was introduced to us. And this is one of the problems that we have, that we face in today life. Because drugs and alcohol, we cannot, it is not immune to our system. It is not ours. The blood that we have is only precious to the life itself, the nature. But because it was introduced, we consume it, we take all of these, these stuff, these drugs and alcohol, it ruins our body. It ruins our lifestyle. And it's one of the biggest problems that we face today.
How will Indigenous Aboriginal people overcome this problem?
It can be overcome, and that is through practice. The culture itself, only the culture itself. If we learn to be united and just practice what we are made for, and then I believe that the world, or the people, the Indigenous people, can be a better person. But if we still continue to live that way of consuming alcohol and drugs, then it won't work. Unless someone stands up, an elder, young people stands up, practice their culture, keep it going, keep fueling the car up, keep putting firewood, let it burn, let it consume, let it keep on going. And then I believe indigenous people will recognize it, that okay, look, here are some people that are trying to make us indigenous people a better person. Then it will help them as well.
Is it possible for Aborigines to live 1 foot in the past with their traditions and 1 foot in the Western world? Is it possible that these two cultures there's a way to blend them, or?
Well, that's a very hard question, that one, but you see, if we live in the Western world and we don't practice our own culture, then our children, they will follow the Western world, not their own culture. But if the family or if person follows their culture and not practice the Western culture, I guess the person, then their children will then follow this area. But like I said before, most remote areas, they have their 2 feet with their culture. Here, we're 1 feet here, 1 feet here. We practice both. But really important that if you have a culture, you level this up. Even though we live in this world, we adapt it together. And it will make young people, especially young people, know and learn about, okay, you have a culture. You are somebody. You have a very unique culture. And in order to do that, you have to practice it. Keep on practicing it. Now, if it's been going for 40,000 years, minimum, well, let it be. Extend millions years. How long will this world be here? Let it go on. Let us practice.
Did you ever go through any conflicts yourself? Drugs, alcohol, or just unhappiness? Did you go through a period of?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Especially when my mom, when she passed on, when she left the world, I began to consume a lot of alcohol. I also did drugs as well. But I learned from my mistakes that because I was practicing those things, I began to lose my spiritual side of my custom. And when I was given an authority of leading the people of Torres Strait down here, especially with dancing, I have a dance group, I began to not to think about, about the alcohol or the drugs, because I thought to myself, okay, I'm a young person, I can be a leader for young people, and I need to show young people that, have a culture instead of following drugs and alcohol. Because the life expectancy for indigenous people, 50 or 60 years old. Our ancestors, they lived on 90, 100, 110 years old. And if we want to be wise about, you know, yourself and the culture itself, be knowledgeable, and you want to live for that long, so you can pass more knowledge and understanding to the generation that comes after you, that instead of practicing that world, that side of the world, keep on grasping that knowledge and understanding that you have learned. And what I did was that I'll talk about Christianity. Christianity was introduced to Torres Strait 1871. They took away a lot of our culture. They took away a lot of our artifacts. But they never took it away from us, especially our ancestors. They practiced it because it's in here, deep inside our hearts. But as time went by, we adapted Christianity and culture together. The culture and Christianity now today very strong. We understand that the world is a gift. The culture also is a gift. Who knows where it came from? How long did it exist? But it's only our conscience that we believe, our faith. We have culture. And the understanding about it is that when we adapt it together, it makes the people a better person as well. Islanders, especially Torres Strait Islanders, we adapted the Christianity because our totems were our semi-gods, minor gods, gods with the lowercase g. Back then, we believed in the animals. But now we adapted that into a different lifestyle and made us civilized. If we weren't civilized, I would have killed you already. Would have cut your head off. We were headhunters. This one here was worn at that time. The headdress.
What's the significance of that headdress?
It's a hidden secret. It is a hidden secret.
In other words, if I tell you, you'll have to kill me.
It is a hidden secret. But we put it this way. It represents the people of the Torres Strait. It also represents the wave or the sea breaks. But there's a story behind the headdress itself that is a secret, only taught by the indigenous people. Only thing we can say to the world is that it's a symbol of the Torres Strait Island people. And it was significant that we wore this during the time when Christianity came. I call this one dari, dirty. When we perform dance, we wear this. Representing the sea, the wave, representing when we perform, chant and dance, a symbol of Torres Strait Island people. This one is original headdress from Murray Island itself. Fine, thin bamboo, the framework that we wrap around with bark, strips of bark, It becomes a frame. The feathers are from the cockatoo feather. But the original headdress, Murray Island, 19 islands in the Straits, they have their own style.
If you had one thing to say, let's say this video goes on YouTube and gets 100,000